Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the very last build video of the Hispano Aviation Ultimatum 2.0 or U2 aircraft. This is the final video in the build series. We have a lot to accomplish in this video, and we're going to be test running this aircraft. We got to finish up the doors, we got to finish up the equipment installation, finish programming, so lots to do. So hang tight and we'll get back into finishing up the Hispano Aviation Ultimatum. All right guys, we finished the last video glassing or putting carbon on the nose door. So it's been a couple days. We've had some stuff to take care of. So this has had lots of curing time. So we've got three layers of fiberglass on that side, 2 layers of carbon on this side, and the door is much stiffer than before. Previously, the plywood was really flexible. The 1 layer of glass helped with that. The carbon really helped with that. So we don't have to do anything more than that. What I did to finish this off, I can't remember if I showed it, but I laid down wax paper, put a layer of foam, and then I put a whole bunch of weight over top of this. So it actually squished it down nicely and made a great profile. So we're gonna cut this door out, and then the first thing we have to do is start priming this thing because we got to get it to where the back doors are as far as the priming / painting stage. So I'm going to cut this carbon out and we will prime this guy. All right guys, so we did all of our sanding on our gear doors, and I just put the second coat of paint on the gear doors and they look phenomenal. That turned out awesome. The prep is definitely extremely key. So when I did my sanding, probably 25% of the primer was sanded off and the rest of it was still intact. So when you're doing something like this, prep is totally key. You'll spend so much time prepping. The actual spraying process like that with a spray bomb took under a minute to spray for each coat. So that was really quick, but it was all the prep process ahead of time that took forever. So we will be using 2K clear on these gear doors. I bought this specifically for this project. So if you're not familiar with 2K clear, it's basically a 2-part material. So there's you take the bottom piece off here. You push a little plunger in and it breaks the material. So then there's 2 parts, there's an A and a B. This is an amazing stuff to work with, works awesome, and absolutely love it. So we're only gonna use just a fraction of the can, so I feel like it's a little bit wasteful and I have nothing else to spray, but this is gonna give us our best, most durable finish. All right, so we've got our 2K clear installed. We'll try and get you a good shot there of the big main door. And worked out awesome. I love using this stuff, it's great. Did 2 coats, you cross coat them, so one direction, another direction, but ultimately lays down just beautifully. So anyways, we're gonna let that do its thing. And gear doors are painted. So the inside of the gear doors are still, well, the nose door is raw carbon, the other ones are fiberglass and wood. We'll paint those after installation. Reason for that is in the case of gluing things on the gear doors, like the mains there, the big kind of half round shape ones. We're going to be gluing metal tubes, like brass tubes on those to hinge for the hinge points. So we'll just paint them probably black afterwards, and they'll just disappear when they're on the plane because all the gear doors are on the underside and the underside of the aircraft is all dark. So that's going to work out good. Anyways, now we're going to move on to the nose plate tray installation. All right, and we've got the primary battery here for the Ultimatum, and this is a new Gens Ace 4000 milliamp 60C battery. Really, really nice battery in that package. And this is going to be a great battery for this aircraft. So we've got the battery scenario all set up now. So we've got Velcro on both of the batteries. We're using a 2200 lighter side of RC battery, 3-cell for the lighting system. So that is there. We're going to put some labels on these eventually. And this is our primary battery plug right there. So really nice battery layout, quite light, very powerful. That's going to work great. Okay, so before we put this tray in, I think we're gonna end up working on this front gear. And the reason for that is right now, without the tray in and with our gear out and stuff, we do have good access to our hinges, which is gonna be quite imperative. So I'm gonna pull this gear out and we're gonna get that front door taped in place, and then we can worry about those hinges. All right, so we had the plane upside down just to get the nose installed, and you can see here the process. So we've got the nose door pretty much centered in the opening, and we've taped it in place. So that's all done. So now if you look from this perspective, from the top of the fuselage, we've got great access to those hinges. So this is the time where we essentially mix up some High-Sol and glue those hinges onto the door. The door is in our right spot, and it is glue time. If you take a look in there, you can see we've got our hinges glued in place. So we used BVM aero epoxy in there, so we're gonna let that cure for 24 hours. We have to just leave it be. So we're gonna move on to the main gear doors. Now these are the doors on the wings, on the main wheels. So essentially what happens here is we've got a piece of piano wire. Now this doesn't go all the way through. We've got two separate pieces. And the actual hinge point, in this case, we're going to use these pieces of carbon, which is just a carbon tube. And then we have a piece of piano wire with a bend, and that goes into a receiving tube inside the fuselage. Now, the nice thing about doing your doors this way is it doesn't need any excess area on the opposite side of the gear door where it's actually going to hinge. So in this case on the Ultimatum, it kind of makes the most amount of sense because we have a little bit of space here, enough to put an offset hinge here, but we don't have any room right here. Like there's absolutely zero room. I mean, our plate or former at the root of the wing comes to about here. So we literally have not enough room. But the nice thing about it is if your pin is right here, that hinge point is right on the pin. So your hinge point's right here. This part or the piece past the pin drops into the wing. So it just works really well in this type of situation. And that's why we're doing it. So essentially we need to come up with a universal measurement so they are working the same. So what we'll do is we've got just a piece of piano wire here, and this is going to be our actual hinge material. I'm going to install two of these carbon pieces on there. Now they're a little bit tight right now because they're cut, but what we're going to do is get those glued in place. Now we're just using another piece of tubing as a guide here, so I'm just going to get it lined up with the edge like this. And what I'll do in this case is I'm going to get a little bit of CA and kind of spot it in place. So we're just going to tack it in place, and we'll pull the wire out, or actually we may just cut the wire off and use it the way it is. And then we'll put some High-Sol over top of it, and that'll glue it in place and make it nice and solid. So we've got the hinges all done on the doors. I glued these a while ago, and you can see there we kind of wrapped the aero epoxy all the way around. So those are curing, worked out awesome. So what we did is I took these doors, put some tape on the wings, laid the doors in place, and marked our pivot points out. So now at least we have a visual representation of where those pivot points are going. Kind of put the wheel in there, gave myself an idea of where that wheel is going to go. So pretty straightforward. It just follows the circle of the opening right here. So the reason for that is this area is very tight. So our servos for the gear doors, they're MKS HV69s. And what we're using is we're using a Dubro servo arm. Reason for the Dubro servo arm is it's got a lot of push out is the number one thing. For a plastic or nylon horn, it's very stiff, so we can put a ball joint on the end for something like this. And what that does is it sets the servo away from the opening as much as possible, which is what I was looking for. So I don't want to use the stock servo arms because they're quite flexible nylon. Great for clevises, not for ball joints. That's why we're using the Dubro ones. And then I sanded these Dubro ones down to give it a lower profile because this has to tuck against the underside of the wing tightly, so we can't have that arm interfering with the mounting. So when you're doing gear doors in a small area like this, there has to be a lot of consideration taken into account of the amount of space that you actually have to work with. So one of the other things we want to keep in mind is when this servo door is closed, we want this arm to be essentially straight across from where the arm mounting is. So if the arm mounting is right here, we kind of want that servo linkage to be like this. Reason for that is if you get the linkage set up properly, so sort of like that, if you get that linkage set up properly, the servo is not really holding the door closed, it's the position of the servo arm that's holding the door closed. So here's maybe a better perspective for you. So if we have the servo mounted like this, the arm is going to be something like that mounted to the door. So when this door is closed, it's the position of this arm and the linkage and everything that's actually keeping the door closed. And then when the servo operates to open the door, it's probably only going to operate something like that. So we need to consider that. We also need to consider having all of this tucked away. So that's the reason for this, the servo, the arm combination. So the face of the servo arm here, I'm going to have flush with the opening. The ball joint's going to be over here, which is going to be out of the way, hopefully, and that's what we are after. So a lot of things to consider, and then we also have to leave enough room here for the hinge points or the pivots of the door. So I need to kind of tuck the servo as tight as I can this direction. So there's a lot going on anyways. So I think what we're going to do now is we are going to get these servos kind of organized. What I'm thinking about doing is putting a piece of servo tape on the servo and pre-mounting a piece of wood on the servo here, putting a little drop of high sol on each of those mount points, and then sticking the servo to the underside of this wing. And the servo tape's going to hold it initially, and then once that high sol cures, that's also going to hold it. So that's my thinking right now. I'm going to give that a bit more playtime and a bit more work. All right, so our door servos are all done. We've done the mounting here. Just took some, what is that, 1/4-inch ply, cut thin strips, glued those two strips together, screwed it into the servo. So we're doing a bit of a double system for mounting the servo here. Number one, we're going to tape the servo to the underside of the wing, or the top side of the opening, I guess, with very strong double-sided tape, double-sided servo tape. So that is the first thing that's going to stick that in place. And we're going to put some high sol on our mounting points here, and the high sol is ultimately going to be really what prevents it from ever moving. But the servo tape is kind of there to hold the servo in place, but also to hold the servo in place while that high sol cures. All right, so our nose door worked out absolutely awesome. Looks great. I had to do a little bit of trimming on it, on the base here, but otherwise it worked out awesome. So if we go to the 90-degree mark, we're about right there. And I think our geometry and everything with using like a ball link here and a ball link there, we'll probably put it, I think I was going to put it on the bottom one, I can't remember. Anyways, we've got to play with geometry quite a bit, but that should work out good too. And the door itself is really stiff, which is nice. So there's not a lot of lateral movement in it between all the different hinges and stuff. So that turned out good. Love it. I think it's awesome. We'll paint the hinges and stuff black, so that'll blend in. Obviously the carbon looks really nice, and the color is a really close match to the rest of the underside. So worked out great. All right, so we're moving on to the main gear doors now. And what we're looking at is we need to make a couple things here. With our marked out areas, what that actually equates to is when we put the gear door in, we need to add carbon tubes where the hinge pins are going to end up. Now, as I've talked about, the hinge for the door is going to be 2 pieces, so 1, 2. We took Dremel and we got rid of some of the structure in the skin here. So we sanded down the foam and everything. What that's going to allow us to do is get that hinge in the right position. So if we went on the underside of the skin, our door is going to be sucked in a little bit because the door is not quite as thick as the actual wing surface. So we want to make this forgiving enough where we can tape the door in place, put some high sol from this side and this side, and that's going to get the door in a nice position. So it's going to be a bit of a trick to get this all set up. We also drilled a hole in the structure right here that allows the carbon tube to go in, and on this side there's lots of space there. So that is the next step, is to get those doors stuck in place. And it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we are up for the challenge. All right, so we've got our gear doors set up here. Our pivot points, we're using copper tubing. So these are the pieces that are actually going to be glued into the fuselage. I have taped the door in place and it is flush with the surface of the wing. So I got my little copper pieces put on there, got the door into place, held it into place, taped it into place, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of CA just to keep those copper pieces in a nice position, nice and tight where we want to locate them, because right now they're probably not touching the top surface, or in this case the top surface of the wing. They're probably floating a little bit. So we're going to just lock them in place with some CA, and then we'll glue them in place with some high sol, and we'll let those cure, and that will be a perfect fit. So with the doors installed and taped in place, we used trusty bent screwdriver and installed some high sol on the hinge points there. So both wings are done. And now what we'll do is we'll leave those wings to cure. And once the hinge points have cured, we can pull the tape off and work on our actuators. All right, and there we go with the primary gear door. That is exactly what I was shooting for. So nice and easy to remove these units. So usually I'd put little keepers on here. We can put a little bit of CA, whatever works. I think we're gonna have enough room to mount our light in there. And to pull this gear door off, all you do is pull the pins in, they just slide in, and the gear door comes off. So nice and easy. So nice, clean fit. Next thing we need to do here is get our mounting point for the actuation of the servo to the gear door all figured out. So that's the next thing we need to work on. And that is going to be, I think, a little bit of a challenge because we don't have a lot of room in here. So it's going to be, I'm curious to see how that works. And we got the servo all hooked up on the nose. Now, one important thing here, and I was having problems with this morning. I'll share it with you guys. So what was happening was the servo would power up, and then it would power down, and then it would power up, power down, power up, power down, and it's actually a setting inside the GS200 controller. So there's a setting for that, and I kind of have dealt with this before. I just don't do it enough where I kind of forget about it. So we go into the setup menu, you go into page 2, and you've got this servo off, and you've got continuous drive or refresh each 5 seconds. So servos are driven for 5 seconds each. That's where this controller was on, which is a problem. So, and then you can do refresh every 15 seconds. Continuous drive is where we want it. So now it's going to work properly. But I was absolutely racking my brain early this morning. I'm like, what's going on with these servos? I'd plug a different brand of servo in, a different model of servo, and it would all do exactly the same thing. It was driving me bonkers. Then I reached out to Greg Alderman at Heli Direct, aka Boomerang Jets. They're an Electron dealer, and he reminded me that there is the servo function that I just showed you guys. So now, that's good. So what we can do is we've got our linkage and stuff all figured out here on the nose. What we need to do is put our screw in to hold the servo arm in place. All right, guys, and we have a box that showed up from Jersey Modeler, and obviously it's a fuel jug in here. So this is one of the new fuel jugs with a bit of a different setup on the electronics. So let's take a look at that. I'm gonna pull this out of the box and we'll take a look at this. Thanks Jersey Modeler for sending this, and it's gonna be cool to see the new setup. All right, guys, and here is the new jug. This is the VP, the 5.5 gallon jug, and everything with it is absolutely awesome, like normal. Now, I'll touch with you on the new features of this jug and new features of the adjustable flow. Everything else with it, of course, is standard Jersey Modeler quality. Dean does great stuff, absolutely awesome. So that's all normal Jersey stuff, but let's take a look quickly here at some of the differences. So here's the included instruction sheet with it, just so you can see. There's a couple different things going on, and this may be some change in progress, but essentially there is an in and out like normal, so in and out flow, right? Fill or drain. And then you've got, instead of the ESC, you've got a fast and slow mode, okay, which is right where my thumb is right here. Now the fast and slow mode, or the reason for this change, is a little bit more reliable electronics and less prone to possibly wearing out like the previous dials. So, and also availability as well. Unfortunately, in this day and age, there's a lot of availability issues still with different products. So we're seeing manufacturers in every facet of not just RC stuff, but everything, you know, pivoting and twisting and turning, trying to keep things consistent. So this is just one of those changes that I actually like. I think it's a simple, nice little change. Doesn't really affect my my view on the product at all. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this jug when we test run the Ultimatum, and that'll kind of be our test run on it to see how it works and that type of stuff. I'll pull you in and we'll take a visual of the actual electronics layout. Now, if you're new to the flying world or jet world, you may not know about Jersey Modeler, but they've been around for a heck of a long time. And I'll just go over some of the features here. Dual pickups. They're also filtered pickups down there as well too. So it's a great pickup system, first of all, to filter the fuel and no flow issues. Most of the containers have a really big cap, and that is very, very nice. You've got the standard, I think this is called a Graylor pump. Anyways, it's the pump that's pretty much always been in use, super reliable. I've got jugs that are about 10 years old that I've given away to other modelers, and they're still in use today, and they still work great. So all that's pretty normal. There's a Nez. Hi, Nez. There's a visual of non-sheet electronics. Buddy, I know you want to be in the video. So this is our fill and empty, and this is our fast and slow right there. So when we go inside, this has changed a little bit. It's actually simplified a little bit, and you've got this dip switch here, which as it sits right now, this may be fixed, it may be movable, not quite sure yet, but on this model, this is a pre-production model, it is movable, and we've got a battery connection there as well too. So you're plugging in there's your battery, so you're plugging in basically a 12-volt battery. I'll generally use, in my case, a 3-cell life battery, so about 10.5 volts in my jugs. And with all my jets, I don't fill them very fast. I fill them quite slow. So anyways, there's a brief shot of the new Jersey jug layout. Again, thank you Jersey Modeler for sending this jug. I appreciate it. Love using your products. And thank you, Dean. A little bit more formal than saying Jersey Modeler. Thank you for everything you do for the hobby as well too. Your Jersey Modeler products have been around for long before I've been in this hobby, and you see them absolutely everywhere. Now these are available at the lighter side of RC or Jersey Modeler. They are obviously, there's some running changes right now, so the pricing and stuff isn't quite sorted out yet-ish, but anyways, cool new product. Okay, so next thing we need to work on here, guys, is getting our mounting points for the main gear doors fastened. So I think what I'm going to use is some 1/8 inch ply, and this is laminated with carbon. And anyways, they're going to make mounts out of that. I'm probably going to make the mounts too big, and then we'll be able to sand them down to fit this area. All right, so we've got a couple things done here. First one is the nose gear door is all set up and ready to go. We still have to paint the hinges and everything black, and we can't put the landing gear in until the tray's in. We've also got our mounts put on our main gear doors. Those are glued in place, waiting for them to cure. Our high sol is still a little bit tacky, but we've got our servo arms on as well too. I got our small little ball joint linkages put together, and it is very, very tight in here, but I think it's gonna work well. So we're waiting for that stuff to cure. So just thinking about what we can do in advance. Now the white dot on the side of the piece of carbon and wood there is kind of where we need to put our ball joint location. So it's very, very close to that bottom corner. I over-exaggerated that a little bit, but that's the location where our hole is going to go through that surface to operate the gear door. It's pretty much the only option we have. With that stuff curing and waiting to cure, we are going to move on to putting the front tray in finally. I know we've talked about that a lot, but it's finally happening. All right, guys, we needed to do a little bit of rearranging to the linkage design. Now, the reason for that is I was playing around with this last night, and in the closed position and with the geometry that we've got going on here, what would happen would be that when this door was closed, we're not getting good force pulling it down, and the linkage would actually just bend out like this, and the door would be able to open about kind of halfway, I think, ish. So I racked my brain at what we could do, and basically we needed to come up with a different design. So what I did was I pulled this servo out last night. It was a little bit of a challenge because of the double-sided tape you remember we put in, and flipped the servo around. So now instead of the output shaft being close to the door like it was before, it's further away from the door. And then what we did is I installed a carbon MKS servo arm. This is one of the 1-inch arms. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna still use that same linkage, but it's gonna be up and down. So essentially, if Trusty represents the servo arm, when the door's open, it'll be level like this. When it's closed, it'll be down like that. Now, obviously, not ideal because we kind of want to have that linkage pulled away, so it's in a straight line like we were doing previously. The downside is with that is there's just not enough room in this wing. So this is going to work out good. We've got a nice stiff carbon horn. We've got a nice stiff mounting point, and I think it's going to be a great solution. The other thing that is nice with this layout is it also gets rid of any contact with the wheel. Previously with that linkage design, what was happening was when the door closes, the ball link here was actually hitting the tire. It would work, but it was contacting the tire, which isn't ideal as well. So this is going to be a good solution, I think, and now we just need to get our linkage and stuff set up on this one. We also need to do the servo swap on this guy here. All right, so we've got our door all done now and needs a little bit of adjustment, but I think that's going to work out absolutely perfect. We've got just a little bit of interference on the back there. We can sand that, make it nice and clean, but that is awesome. So it's a nice setup. I like it. It holds the door nicely when it's closed, so I don't have a problem with that. And then when it's open, we've got, we can probably go a little bit further with the servo to hold it open, but even at that point there, we are past 90 degrees from the wing, so that should work beautifully. Obviously, we've got to sand this down now that we know the location of the ball joint, but that, I'm very happy with that. That is working great. All right, so we got the one door all finished now, other than a couple little adjustments here and there, but I think we are good. So we painted the inside black, pulled that out. I shaped the mount there for the ball joint system, and we are all good. That is wicked. So I'm gonna put a little bit of probably CA to hold the pins in place, but I'm not gonna do that till we're 100% done. So I also had to extend the servo wire a little bit, so I just put a little extension on there, and we've got the servo wire run along the root of the wing. But that is beautiful, functional wise, works awesome. So what we'll do now is we'll do the same thing to this side because we have the system all figured out now. And so yeah, we'll get that done first. And then what we'll do is we'll start working on our other parts of our gear doors and get that stuff sorted. This was definitely the biggest hurdle. On another side note, we got the tray all installed. Now this was a little bit of a challenge, definitely needed help from beautiful wife. So she had the board kind of held up like this. We put all the wires through the appropriate holes and then put the board in place. It doesn't look like the board should fit in this aircraft, but it definitely does. Kind of just tucks in and drops down. Really good fit, takes up that whole space. And we've got all of our wires still to deal with, but it looks awesome. We did have to take the UAT off to get the board in, so that is one thing to think about. All right, so both of the main doors are now done. We have gone and fit our leg doors here for both of the gear. So the way we're gonna do this is I was thinking about threading and tapping the leg. Problem is there's not a lot of length here in the leg to do that. So I'm gonna skip out on that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna glue the door, the cover, to the leg, and we've opened up a hole there so we still have access to the set screw, which is good. And what we need to do is mix up some Hysol, obviously, and get this kind of sorted out. Now I'm gonna put probably a little spacer underneath here. We may just leave it and use the Hysol to level things out, but we are really close. If we just go flush with that leg, it's a really close position. We just need to raise this section up just a little bit there, you can see it. All right, so we're getting ready to cycle this gear for the first time. The Hysol is cured enough now that we can cycle this gear. And what I'm kind of working on here is this last door. Now, we've got a couple issues with this door. Maybe not issue, but we gotta also route our brake line as well too. So problem with the brake line is it's gonna come kind of down here and tuck underneath. So we're gonna have to put a slot in the door, or this cover, I guess. So I'm just kind of thinking how we want to do this, because in order to do that, we're gonna have to put a cutout right here, which isn't bad. I mean, it still covers up all the crap. I was thinking about just leaving it off. But I think it'll be a better finished look with it on. So our door isn't hooked up, it's just the landing gear that's hooked up. All right, so we have the first cycle on the doors or main gears here. So let's see how these work. Beautiful. That's awesome. Nice and clean. That's great. And we'll just retract it. Beautiful, super clean. That is awesome. That's just a little bit of paint marker there we'll get rid of, but that is beautiful. That is so clean. All right, Nez is chilling in the sun, supervising, and we've got the wing on for the first time. I should say completed wing on for the first time. So everything worked out good. The plugs worked out good. We've got our plug-ins done for the wire connectors. There's a shot of the completed leg and everything. We do still have some tape there holding the landing gear cover on because that needs to cure. But turned out awesome. So now we need to match the wings up. So get the other wing done the same as this and we'll put the other wing on. All right, so we got both wings on the aircraft and everything is wired up nicely. Very happy with it. It looks phenomenal. And one thing we're playing with here is the lights. And turned out really nice. So we'll take a quick look at the light system. This is basically a Sky Candy setup with obviously a Unilite afterburner. So as we've seen in previous videos, the wing lights are amazing. The gear light we haven't sorted out yet, so we'll have to figure that out. But it's not plugged in anyways, that's why the gear's not turned on. We've got the beacon on the underside, which is awesome. All right, now one of the coolest things is the diffuser ring. Now I've never used one of these diffuser rings before, but it is a very cool effect. You'll see when I turn this on that the entire ring glows. It is mental how bright that is. So it turned out just awesome. So visible from every single angle. Obviously the camera doesn't do that justice, but it is really bright. All right, and first gear cycle fully assembled. So don't mind the buzzing doors, but everything turned out beautiful. All right, we are coming close to being wrapped up, the wiring and stuff on this aircraft. So just been working away, plugging stuff in and getting things organized. It's still a bit of a rat's nest in there because we have to deal with 2 receivers, but basically have been adding lines into the Cortex. All the gear lines are done and we're getting close. So one of the things I'm going to do in this scenario is we've got both of our receivers plugged into the Cortex. We're just going to run an auxiliary power supply from the Rex 12, which is where our primary power comes through. So we're just going to pick one of these ports. It's just going to be the blue and the red wire, and then we'll run that into port number 6 on the Cortex. And what that does is that just adds an extra power supply to the system. So I'm going to clean this up, and your next view will be this all clean. We've got all of our wiring and tubing and everything done. So just to kind of review everything, we've got our S-Spec on that side. We've got our 2 receivers on that side. This plane is set up in dual path, so both receivers go into the Cortex. We've got our 2 batteries, our primary batteries. So our primary battery to run everything is here, and the 2200 battery is our lighting setup. So we're going to label both of those inputs. The switch there is for our lighting system. So when we turn that on, the lighting system is on. And the way this needs to work is you power on the aircraft, you turn on your lighting system. When you're done your flight, you power off the lighting system, you turn off your aircraft. And then there's a digital sensor hooked up to, I just put it in one of the receivers here, and that's operating as a gear channel. So that turns the nose light on and off. Fuel system's all done. We put our vent fitting down there. So on the left side of the aircraft, you can see it right there. So that's all good. Everything's plumbed back to the turbine. We've got our fill line right here. Now this UAT, I would generally run a Tygon tube all the way, but this fitting is like a compression fitting, so we have to use Festo. So we used a 6mm Festo up to that point, and then used an adapter and went to a piece of Tygon. So this is where we're putting our fuel into the aircraft. So a couple other little things we want to do is I want to run a plug up to this location right here, and that's going to be our plug to plug in our GSU. Now it's not too bad getting it down there, but it's a little bit of a pain trying to plug it in the side of the turbine controller. So it's going to be a lot easier if we just have a plug sitting up here, and then it can sit on the wing or just float around. But this is not going to be mounted inside the aircraft. permanently. So that's one thing we need to do. We did some painting on all the white bits, so the hinges are all painted black. And then the last thing we need to do control-wise on the aircraft is switch the servo arm out. So we're going to put that longer servo arm in so we can get all of our travel from our rudder. So that'll be a fairly easy swap, so we'll get that done as well. And then we'll pull out our CG machine and do the CG on this aircraft. All right, so we've got our RC CG machine out. I love this tool. If you guys haven't seen the review I did on this thing, I'll put a link in the description down below. But there's the information. Absolutely love this tool to use with my Zykoi scales. Love this thing. Now what I've done is initially here filled up the UAT and was just checking for leaks. So that was the whole point of it. Filled up the UAT, filled up the first tank, and just was checking for leaks, checking fittings, all that type of stuff. So we're good there, which is awesome. I drained the fuel back out, and now we've got our UAT full. So we're gonna balance this plane initially with UAT full. Because the main tanks are essentially very close to the CG, we're also going to fill this tank about halfway through the process, and we'll see how that all works out, but we are ready to CG this aircraft. Another side note, the remote switch is installed there. Now that plugs into the SPEC, so everything works well with that as well. All right, so we've got our Ultimatum U2 on the RC CG machine. Man, I love this tool. It's so nice. Makes this process so much easier. Okay, so we're given a range on the U2. So what the range is 195 back from the leading edge to 200. So what I did is I plugged the 195 numbers in initially, and fine. And then I plugged the 200 numbers in, and we're 0.05 pounds nose heavy at the 200 numbers. So what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll change this. So that is going to be 54. Save. We'll select that. So at the 195 numbers, we are basically perfect. So we're right in that range without adding a single ounce to this aircraft. Dang, that is perfect. We are at 25.18 pounds. This aircraft is going to be a rocket. Now, one thing I really love about this aircraft so far, and yes, I've only had it on the stand, I haven't flown it, but when you have an ultra flash and you get it very neutral, what happens is that landing gear is so close to the CG point that there's almost zero weight on the nose. This aircraft, with our CG set where they're recommending it, we've actually got a decent amount of weight on the nose. I mean, the scale itself is saying 1.64 pounds, which is really cool. So that is a nice setup. Really love that. All right, guys, so with that done, it is time to fill up that tank and run this engine. All right, so fuel tanks are now full. We've got just a little bit of room left for fuel. I didn't go all the way to the top. So we're basically takeoff weight with 3.8 liters of fuel. We are at 32 pounds. Now, if you remember, it's got a Swiwin 170 engine. So we've got at sea level, at perfect conditions, we've got 37.4 pounds of thrust. My Ultra Flash that I used to own had this exact same engine in it, and at our elevation, 3,200 feet, with a bunch of a thrust loss, I'd be able to take that thing off and go straight up. This thing is going to be able to do that as well too. Very exciting. All right, guys, it's time to test run the Ultimatum. Now, there's a couple things that we're going to look at while we're test running this engine. Because of the single battery setup, what I'm going to do while the engine's igniting is I'm going to circle the sticks. So that's basically running all the servos on the aircraft. And the point of that is when we look at the Swiwin screen, it'll tell us the voltage of that primary battery, which will be interesting to watch. Now, the battery's fully charged right now. We have had the plane on for a little bit, just doing some of the setup, but really it's, I would consider it a fully charged battery at this point. So let's run the plane. So yeah, like with everything running, we're only at 3.2 amps. 4 amps, 5. Restart test. All right, guys, and that is everything for the build of the Hispano Aviation Ultimatum. Jurgen, congratulations on your new aircraft. This thing turned out very, very nice. Very impressed with every aspect of this aircraft. It is an absolute beauty. As far as time goes, a lot of people want to know how much time I put into certain builds. So this one was a lot. We're looking at about 95 hours. Total on this aircraft, and for a sports aircraft or a sports jet, that's a lot of time. But one of the big time sucks on this plane was the gear doors was the biggest one. The lighting system, the leading edge lenses and stuff was a big one, but the gear doors ultimately added a significant amount of time. So what I also do when I'm recording videos like this is if I'm doing the build in an evening and I work 4 hours on the build, I'll usually take an hour off just for videoing time and stuff like that. So just because people ask the question, so there's the answer. Turned out awesome, very happy with everything, and beautiful aircraft. So thanks guys for watching the build series. If you have any questions, list them down below. Thanks for supporting the channel. We've got a lot of great projects coming up. That's it, and we'll see ya in the next video.